Welcome to the DeFi Standard. This is Patty XRP, and today we're going to touch on what all went down with the Kusama Network rollout back starting in 2019 to about present day, just to get some comparison to the newly announced Canary Network for Flare, dubbed the Songbird Network. And so, what I want to do is kind of give people a perspective on how some other projects have launched in the past, and as Polkadot created Kusama as a Canary network before launching the official Polkadot network, I figured that would be a perfect one to kind of go through, and we can draw some comparisons and differences, and also maybe look to Kusama for what a possible future on the Songbird network may look like. So let's go ahead and hop in. So this is really going to be date based, and I went through all the blogs that they have on the Polkadot and Kusama websites for specifically relating to Kusama, and that's how I've kind of put together this timeline. And with that, back in July 15th of 2019, Dr. Gavin Wood, who is the founder of Polkadot and the Web3 Foundation, announced the launch of Kusama Network as a Canary network for the Polkadot mainnet that would be launching eventually in August of 2020. And there wasn't a set date for Polkadot at the time when they rolled out Kusama, but it was a way for them to start testing what they would eventually do on the Polkadot network once it was live. And with this, the theory behind Kusama is that R&D stands for risk and danger, hence kind of the chaos warning that Flare put out for Songbird in their blog. Um, they define Kusama as a Canary network and an early unaudited version of Polkadot, and they also stated it would exist as long as a community maintains it. And interestingly enough, Kusama has grown a lot from this point in time. And, I've read stuff in online and in videos that there's like Kusama maxis now at this point that really love the speed at which the Kusama network upgrades, especially as a lot of the powerful things that will be coming to Polkadot are, have been launching on Kusama before they actually get to Polkadot, which is kind of similar with what we're going to see with Songbird and the Flare network. Songbird's going to have the time series oracle first. It's going to have the F asset system first. It's going to have the state connector system first. We now see Trustline and Probity, as well as Flare Finance, are going to be launching their Dapps on top of Songbird before they go on Flare network. So Songbird's already starting to see a lot of things coming to it first before the Flare network has even launched, or before the Flare network gets those different applications and protocols. And moving down, so about a month later, on August 22nd, 2019, they had the official announcement for the rollout and governance plans of Kusama. They want Kusama to be able to find out how their protocol would work under real economic conditions. So Kusama has real life value in it. The network is like a $1.5 billion market cap. So, I mean, that's pretty substantial. It's right around the top 50 for all of cryptos. And, people would probably were calling this at the time a glorified test net. But really, it's a Canary network and its own operational blockchain. And interestingly enough, they went with a soft launch on Kusama, and they didn't make it through the whole thing without some issues, which we'll touch on here. So basically, Kusama started out as something called proof of authority, which means that the validators were centralized and all run by the Web3 Foundation, of which I said Dr. Gavin Wood is the head, and he was also the head of the Polkadot and Kusama blockchains. Additionally, the Web3 Foundation held the single key to the governance mechanism when they rolled it out, and much of the network functionality was not available, with the main focus on Kusama at the beginning were around the consensus aspects of the network. And they also stated that once 50 to 100 validators that were well backed, once they emerged, then the Web3 Foundation would let go of the reins, per se, and transform the network into its final state as a decentralized proof of stake blockchain. And so 1 month after August 2019, at the end of September 2019, they launched the second iteration of the Kusama blockchain. Basically, the validators had to upgrade, but also stored the history of the first iteration. And they referred to this as a hard spoon, as they were storing all of the history from the first version of Kusama. And so they said it wasn't, exactly a hard fork, but a hard spoon. And then moving a month later to October 2019, the second iteration of Kusama underwent a full runtime upgrade. And what's cool about this is a runtime upgrade is how a blockchain can autonomously, atomically, and instantly upgrade from one version to another, relieving the need for a hard fork. So, one of the big things with the Polkadot project is that they would like to eliminate forks in general, as they can be really contentious in the community and split like the value that's there into two separate entities. And Polkadot is all about interoperability and a bet against maximalism. So I can totally understand why that's kind of in their roadmap. And with this runtime upgrades, they had some new functionality launched. And then we have another month after, in November 27th of 2019, they launched the third version of Kusama, including releasing of the governance reins by the Web3 Foundation, including the move to a decentralized proof of stake blockchain. At this point, the validator count had grew to 150 validators. There were some minor glitches in the first two iterations involving short production halt times. So that's important to note that, like, Kusama didn't launch fully perfectly. Like, they had some issues that resulted in halting of blocks being finalized that they had to fix. And then also from this process, which was about, I'd say, 2 to 3 months of Kusama being live before they transitioned it to a decentralized proof of stake chain. They did find a small number of important issues from the process, which required launch of a fresh chain similar to the hard spoon from the first to second iterations of Kusama. So that's why, with this move into a decentralized proof of stake chain, they actually basically launched a new version and had them do the hard spoon that we just described to get to this third iteration. And so things start getting better for Kusama at that point. They run through several runtime upgrades in December of 2019, but then on January 6th of 2020, Kusama suffered a halt due to a runtime upgrade logic failure, and Kusama had to perform a rollback of approximately 48 blocks or 25 minutes on the consensus of that network. And this would take them back to before the problematic upgrade occurred. And in order to catch back up, the validators ran at a 6x internal speed compared to the external world, which brought the Kusama blockchain consensus back to present. And this was kind of their way to solve the issues that happened. And I mean, a rollback is not unsubstantial. Like, that's pretty big that they had to fix it. And we can see, like, it still grew from beyond, that tough time in the network's history. And then later in January, they were able to start performing runtime upgrades again, and they were successful. On June 14th of 2020, the Kusama governance passed a referendum to multiply the Polkadot token supply by a factor of 100. So I believe it went from about 10 million total Polkadot tokens to 1 billion. It's higher now because inflation, but that's kind of how that worked. And then in August 17th of 2020, multiple code bugs resulted in nodes dropping from the Kusama network, along with database history loss. This caused slashing to occur due to this failure, which slashing is basically the way to punish validators that are not acting in the way that they're supposed to be. So either, like, causing double spends or things like that, or trying to put through false blocks. And the Kusama Council, since this wasn't the fault of any of the validators, decided that they would reimburse the validators that suffered slashing. And then after that, they released new runtime upgrades with the bug fixes. And then, we go a long time here, so almost a year. And Additionally, I guess before we move on, I should note that Polkadot launched around August of 2020. So that started coming out, and Kusama really started picking up steam once the Polkadot network went live. And I think people, were getting excited about Polkadot. We saw it get into the top 10 like extremely quickly, and it's pretty much held its place since then. So moving to this year, June 7th, Kusama announced its first Parachain auctions and launched them. So they also stated that history was made by Kusama as the first fully decentralized, secure, heterogeneously sharded blockchain, which Polkadot would become the second, which is funny because, Kusama is their Canary Network and it became the first blockchain to do something that Polkadot was trying to do. But that's because they go through all this testing that happens on Kusama before adding these updates onto the main net for Polkadot. Additionally, you know, Kusama acted as this Canary Network testing for Polkadot, and they started having these 7-day slot auctions to bond tokens for applicable parachain projects. So, some of what I just said, you're probably not going to understand, and this is where I think we can draw some differences between the Flare network and Polkadot. So, with Kusama and Polkadot, they have basically this thing called a relay chain, which is like the main part of each of those ecosystems, but it's very lean. It just handles like consensus and a couple other different parts of the blockchain ecosystem. And these parachains are essentially blockchains that can be spun up that connect back to the relay chain so that all these different blockchains connecting to Polkadot can be interoperable with each other. And they utilize these things called slot auctions for these parachains, where holders of either, if it's on Kusama, the KSM token, or if it's on Polkadot, the DOT token, you basically will loan it to a parachain project so that they can lease the parachain spot that they're going to hold for X amount of time, which means that your token is going to be locked up for possibly a year or more, depending on what those terms are. And because of that, that's going to put a decreased pressure in the supply of the Kusama token or the DOT token if a bunch of people are locking them up so that these parachains can lease spots to connect to the relay chain. And so we see that like that's part of the tokenomics, and one of the things that people expected with Kusama and probably started buying that up beforehand in anticipation of the price going up. So I do want to add that, with Flare Network, we have a different thing in Songbird. If you want to mint F assets, which I don't know if they'll stay called that on Songbird, but, just to compare it back to Flare, we know that the Songbird token, similar to Spark, will have to be locked up as collateral at 2.5 times the value. However, I don't know, how many of these F assets are actually going to be minted on Songbird. I would imagine much less than I expected on Flare Network. So that's kind of some things that played into the Kusama token really appreciating in price that could be different than with the Songbird token that I want to point out. Also, the Kusama token, I think it still has that like original supply that DOT did of around 10 million. So it has a much lower supply, hence why the price per token is really high. So I like to compare the market caps with Songbird and Kusama in the future since the supplies are completely different. And moving forward from there, on June 21st of this year, the first parachains successfully connected to the Kusama relay chain. There was a DeFi project that was occupying one of these parachains that was able to get their slot called Karura. And it's basically the Kusama version of a project called Akala that is going to launch on Polkadot as a parachain. And so, they basically created two different versions of their project, one for Kusama, one for Polkadot. And, it'll be interesting to see what some of these different dApps in the future do with Songbird versus Flare Network. Do they keep the same name and move over? I think, like, for now, we're going to see Trustline and Flare Finance both participate and launch their protocols on top of Songbird. They're going to keep the same names on Songbird and Flare Network, it looks like at this point, unless they decide that they're going to call it something else. But we do know both of those dApps are going to be launching on top of Songbird for us to practice with. And additionally, Flare Finance has already said they'll have more incentives to earn DFLR for the airdrop they're eventually going to have that you can swap into YFLR on Flare Network. So this will be interesting because for Songbird to me to kind of be a long-lasting blockchain like Kusama, there's got to be some kind of incentives there for people to want to stay on that network and perform the upkeep and the community governance that needs to happen for it to last a long time. But we can see with Kusama, like they had some problems. They also had some really great stuff that happened. Like they've successfully launched some of the flagship protocols that aren't even on Polkadot yet. So Kusama actually has the ability to do smart contracts while Polkadot isn't even there yet. Because with these parachains, that's where the smart contract logic is going to live, as opposed to Flare. It's on the chain directly. The Polkadot network only has its relay chain up and none of these parachains because they're being tested on Kusama first. So eventually we'll see these parachains come to Polkadot later this year. And then it'll start having smart contract capabilities, but it doesn't at this point. And so this kind of takes me to the last part of this video. I just wanted to give people some perspective on the shift in timeline from what we originally were expecting with Flare to what we're now getting. So originally, we were probably going to see Flare Network launch at the beginning of August with just the FTSO being live. The F asset system was not going to be live until October of this year, probably at the earliest, as it was going to be a governance vote that launched it. That's looking like it's going to change now with the new timeline. But to finish up this original timeline, parts of Flare Finance would have launched in August 2021. And then the Flare Finance airdrop would have happened in September 2021. And then I wouldn't have expected Trustline to launch until October either. So what we would have seen in this original timeline was a much slower rollout of Flare Network and the dApps that are building on it. We just would have had the like base level Flare protocol a little sooner. So now what we're getting is at the beginning of September, we should see Songbird Network launching. We're going to be able to participate on that with the FTSO coming first. Then they'll bring on the state connector system and F asset systems so we can participate in those as well. We're also going to see in September Flare Finance and Trustline launch parts of their protocol on Songbird. And then we would move into October of this year. Flare Network will most likely launch. I will say, don't think these are hard dates. They're goals. If some kind of big glitch or issue is found on Songbird, then that may take longer for the initial Flare Network rollout. But honestly, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because it's like, all right, well, at least they found this and it didn't happen when Flare Network launched. And then additionally, so like we see Flare Network go live in October. We see Flare Finance is going to go live in October as well. We're going to see Trustline launch most likely in October at this point. And then also the F asset system would launch in October as there'll be sufficient testing to make sure it works on Songbird now with real world value, that the F asset system will be able to launch very shortly after, if not at the same time, the Flare network protocol goes live. And then that means at the beginning of November, the Flare Finance airdrop would happen. And basically, these Flare network and the two main dApp projects that we have covered on this channel, they will all be out there in the open in October and November of this year. So really, it's not pushed back that far as all this stuff getting launched and out there. And we're also getting additional value with the Songbird token. Yeah, sure. I expect it to be pretty low value, but it's something to play with that you don't have to, invest additional money if you want to, and you can get some practice before Flare goes live. So to me, honestly, like this is a pretty good setup. You can argue about the messaging and marketing and all that stuff. They should have told us sooner. I'll give anybody gripes with that stuff, but ultimately, these are things that take a really long time. Going back to Polkadot, they had an ICO in 2017 and it's 2021 and they still don't have smart contracts. Same thing with Cardano. They had an ICO in 2017. They still don't have smart contracts. So those people have been waiting 4 years potentially since they purchased the token. And we didn't find out about this Flare Network airdrop until like last October or September. So like the rollout period's way faster from when we knew about it. Nobody, you can say you invested money all you want if you bought XRP to get the airdrop, but you didn't directly invest into the project or the token. So it's more of an indirect thing to me. But yeah, I just want to do this video hopefully to give some people different perspective on the timeline and compare it to a project that's already happened and has an ongoing timeline that utilizes a Canary network. Hopefully you guys found this enlightening, or at least you learned something about Kusama and just like different blockchain rollouts, since we don't always follow new blockchains being created this closely, as well as like what their schedule is supposed to look like. But that's going to wrap it up for me. I'm Patty XRP with the DeFi Standard, and I'm out.